Over the last few weeks of the F1 off-season, three major members of the FIA have left the organisation. First it was Steve Nielsen, the sporting director for single-seaters. Then it was the FIA's Commissioner for Women, Deborah Mayer, and finally it was announced earlier this week that the third addition to that list would be Tim Goss, the single-seater technical director. It's also been announced that Tim Malyon, another veteran of the sport, will be moving up from within the organisation to become the new sporting director in place of Nielsen. The presidency of Mohammed Ben Sulayem began back in 2021, and he ran with the goal of inciting change within motorsport's global governing body after the end of Jean Todt's administration. Trust and fairness, global funding for young drivers, new categories, and all while getting the right people in the right leadership positions. That was the election platform, and it was hugely important for Ben Sulayem to secure the confidence of each of the FIA's voting members that are evenly spread around the world. But major departures like these, on the surface, they are different people in different roles leaving for different reasons, but many are looking in from the outside with suspicion of even more serious issues at the heart of the organisation. Now, of course, many of you will have already made the analytical connection that controversy and the FIA just go hand in hand. They've done for so much of the organisation's history, but that's kind of the point of them in the first place. I mean, you look at the driver's strike in '82, the whole Prost and Senna battle in '89 and '90, the tragedy of the 1994 season and the response of Dr. Watkins and Max Mosley, the then incumbent president. You look forward to the modern era, you've got like the 2007 Spygate scandal, the 2009 Brawn years, the photo story that the Disney doc dived into, and even the 2021 championship finale that led to the resignation of the then race director. And of course the cost cap too. I think I've hit my limit of commas in this sentence, but you get the picture. The presidency of Ben Sulayem also came at a hugely significant point in the wider motorsport industry, called in the FIA's documentation the mobility sector. Electrification, hydrogen, automation, and the incentive structures of all those interconnected businesses, they all have their own hopes for the future of racing and their views of what their role should be within that. Now that challenge to oversee all of that along with the FIA's motorsport categories to keep the sporting side sufficiently connected to the mobility sector, allowing the sport to be justified through that connection, that's one of the many puzzles sitting on the president's proverbial desk. It's far from the only one though, and we're going to talk through today some of the others that are of major importance to the world of Formula One. Is it really the total mess that the BBC's anonymous source claims it to be? Well, that staff turnover really is a major issue, and I see two real components within that. First, there's the economic factor that comes with the crossover. In a way, it's a parallel between the public and private sector dynamic that we see across all industries. You've got the competing teams and the commercial rights holders of the sport, the people that the FIA governs over. Then you've got the companies within that. These companies can offer bigger salaries to attract talent away from the FIA to get them to utilise their skills and knowledge on the sporting side rather than the regulatory. And the second component of that staffing problem is then the retention of that talent. Once you've sold them on that promise of power, that level of responsibility and authority over all the teams that no role an individual team can match, you have to equip that talent with the tools to succeed in their position and let them exercise that power fairly. The lack of Steve Nielsen's ability to do that is rumoured to be what led to his exit. Despite the optimistic quote that he gave in the FIA's press release that announced his departure, his frustration arose as he could see what needed to be fixed but was not able to or allowed to fix it. Exactly what he wanted to change and fix is not a matter of public knowledge yet, but what the FIA will be hoping is that Tim Malyon, Steve's replacement, can find a way to make these changes or some kind of solution to the same problems and then stay in that place of sporting director for more than a single year to see those solutions play out and learn the lessons from their implementation. And then you've got that economic incentive of the roles of the Formula One teams being more attractive, greater than those at the FIA. That's exactly the move that Tim Goss, the departing single-seat technical director that we spoke about in the intro, that's the move that he's expected to make. But what I do want to touch on here though, is that the fact that there's this crossover between people going from the teams to the FIA and back to the teams and so forth, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, despite the social media logic and conjecture that we've seen run rampant in Formula One recently. You'll find it very challenging if you want someone with years of Formula One experience and knowledge who has never worked for a Formula One team before. That Venn diagram of candidates is basically a single circle. I mean, where else are they going to get that valuable experience unless they spend their entire career purely on that regulatory side? And another key challenge is that in this boom of investment and viewership that Formula One is experiencing, that profit is of course flowing to the profit-making entities connected to the sport. That money is power. the richer the pockets of Liberty Media and all the teams, the greater their bargaining power. That's something that I think goes a long way in explaining the Andretti story, something that the FIA are open to and the teams are seemingly opposed to in equal measure. Then you've got the story of the Las Vegas Grand Prix, its challenges, its successes, and the vertical integration that came with the development of that venue. It's an asset that FOM directly own, with the goal, of course, of securing a greater proportion of the revenue generated from that event. It's something that economists write about with all businesses in a way, that demand for perpetual growth, for this year to be 2, 5, 10% better than last year. It means that in those leadership roles, they'll always be looking for new ways to squeeze out more money, and in doing so, increase their bargaining power to their governing body, in this case the FIA. And in a wide-ranging and characteristically engaging interview with the German motorsport magazine, Ben Sulayem, the president, touched on many of these topics. On the economics, he said, "I'm not involved in the stock price or ticket sales, we just need fairness, that's my mission. We define clarity between ourselves and the FOM, Liberty, that's good. We need to understand who I represent. I represent the head of the house. We are not a service provider. No, we're not. I keep saying that and I believe it too. I respect them. They're here for profit. That's why they bought it. Why else would they buy the lease? They're smart people and I support them. But at the same time, I was elected by the members of the FIA and I do the best for the FIA. I don't get paid, I don't complain about it, I already knew that." And in the same interview, the president also gave his remarks on the current environment of media leaks, rumours, and the anonymous sources that punctuate the pages of these news stories, particularly in the wake of what we saw with the Wolf story in December and the president's own controversies. He said, "Do you really think I would be in this position if I was only surrounded by stupid people? Of course not. My team is very smart. The paddock is a small living environment. Everyone knows everyone." And with that quote then, it's kind of easy to feel that it's all getting a bit like House of Cards or Succession in Formula One. Restoring that public confidence, that fight against corruption, is a major uphill battle, partly just with the internal psychology and the cognitive bias of fans who'll jump at any opportunity to dish out 15 minutes of shame to anyone caught in that news cycle. We'll have to wait and see whether the new leadership will make any change to this dynamic in 2024 or merely fall into that same trap. Now, the final challenge that I wanted to touch on in this video gets us back to the technical side, of course, another huge part of what the FIA holds power over. The next major technical shift in Formula One is coming in 2026, the same year that the Audi brand will join the sport with the Sauber team, and the same year that the Ford badge will find its way onto that Red Bull car, as well as Aston Martin making the switch to the Honda engines. Now, we had the shift to hybrids in 2014, the width change in 2017, the ground effect aero in 2022, and with the change in 2026, that brings with it greater electrification, touching on the same link to that mobility sector of the FIA that we spoke about in the intro. But the specifics of these regulations in their current form, which you can read in their entirety here on the FIA's website, these regulations have not been welcomed with open arms by some of the teams and drivers. They feel that the resultant impact on driving style and feel will not produce high quality racing action, and the proposed solution of increasing the role of active aerodynamics like those found on the Williams FW14B or the current DRS system, that solution to some engineers is a bit like a bandage on a bullet wound. A necessarily optimistic and generalised FIA statement quoted the departing technical director Tim Goss saying, "I believe the organisation is on a firm footing in terms of technical expertise for the tasks which lie ahead, particularly the introduction of the 2026 regulations." But Red Bull's technical director Pierre Wache spoke to motorsport.com last week and he gave a completely different view. Pierre said, "You can't put a patch on a patch on a patch to achieve something. You have to look at the problem with a bigger view and say, how do I sort this out and solve my problem? What car characteristic do I need to achieve something? If you need a patch to solve some things, you can still do that afterwards, but you don't start with the patch first, otherwise it'll never work." Now, Wache has a wealth of technical expertise behind these comments, but what it may also signal is that Red Bull specifically has faced challenges in their power unit development, and they're aiming to use their lobbying power to get some change made that will in turn yield on-track gains for them in an area they've been unable to solve. The evidence for this is that they're seemingly the most outspoken of any team on this topic, but any further speculation on that would probably lead me into hypocrisy, as I've already criticised some of the baseless narratives we've seen in the media this year. So in wrapping up then, of course, there's a huge amount that goes into running global motorsport, far more than just Formula One and far more than we can cover exhaustively in this video, but what we've talked through today are some of the major challenges facing the organisation, challenges that are exacerbated by the staff turnover that we've seen in the last month. The media cycle is always tricky in the off-season. Both the press and the fans themselves are eager for drama and controversy that the racing itself normally provides, but where we are at the moment, the scars that the essentially hollow stories leave it's far more realistic that the return of racing in February will add to the criticism and the challenges that the FIA face, rather than just replace that criticism with analysis of what's happening on track. Of course, we'll keep you up to date here on the channel with all the major stories as we go racing again in 2024. But for now, I'll say thank you very much for watching. Subscribe here to see more from us and check out crash.net for coverage across the 2- and 4-wheeled racing world.